All right, so today we're going to dive into something pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
Empathy. We all know it. We all feel it, hopefully.
Yeah, most of us.
But did you know that men and women, we might actually experience it differently?
Interesting.
Yeah, and we're gonna really unpack all that today.
Love it.
All about, how we react emotionally when we see other people struggling.
I'm ready to dive in.
Yeah, and get this. Studies consistently show that women, at least in the U.S., they report higher levels of empathy than men.
Okay, that makes sense to me, actually.
Right. So we're going to try to figure out, what's going on there.
Yeah, let's get to the bottom of it.
Data on the screen, numbers come alive. Male, female flows where the patterns thrive. Visual charts, public outlets unify. Gender decoded, bringing truth to light. Watch them all drum fill. We break it down, real talk. Trends unveiling, facts from every block. Here's your insight, watch the data glide. Gender decoded, let the beats collide.
Today we're tackling something super interesting.
Definitely.
How men and women experience empathy.
Yeah.
And, we've got some fascinating research from a study done here in the U.S., and it really digs deep into these differences.
It does.
But, this isn't about, putting people in boxes or saying all men are this way and all women are that way.
Right.
It's about getting a better understanding of, the nuances and how we connect with each other's experiences.
Absolutely. It's looking at those finer points, those subtle differences.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think we often hear, these generalizations about women being the more empathetic gender.
Yeah, for sure.
And this study actually kind of backs that up. It found that women in the U.S. consistently report higher levels of empathy compared to men.
Interesting.
And, one of the things that really stood out to me was, when it comes to feeling genuine sadness for somebody else's suffering, 71% of women reported feeling that compared to 53% of men.
Wow. That's a pretty significant difference.
Yeah, it's a huge gap, right?
Yeah.
So what could be behind that? What could be driving this difference?
Well, there are a few potential explanations to consider,
Okay.
And one of them is the biological perspective. We can't ignore the role of hormones.
Yeah.
Hormones like oxytocin, sometimes called the love hormone, play a big role in things like empathy and social bonding.
I've heard of that, yeah.
And studies have actually shown that, women tend to have higher levels of oxytocin than men.
Oh.
So that could be part of the picture. And then, of course, you have evolutionary psychology,
Okay.
which, suggests that women, because they've historically been the primary caregivers throughout human history, may have evolved to be more attuned
Makes
to
sense.
other people's needs, more sensitive to those cues.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So it's like nature is giving women a little bit of a head start.
You could say that,
Yeah.
but of course it's not just about nature, right?
Right.
Nurture also plays a huge role. Yeah,
Socialization, how we're raised, the messages we receive,
absolutely.
it all shapes how we experience and express empathy.
So, how does that all play into this?
Well, think about it. How do we raise boys and girls? Girls, they're often encouraged to express their emotions openly,
Yeah.
to be caring and nurturing.
Right.
Whereas
Yeah. boys,
sometimes they're told to toughen up. Boys don't cry.
Man up.
Exactly. Man up. Hide those feelings.
Mhm.
And over time, these messages can really have a lasting impact
Yeah.
on how we perceive and respond to emotions, both our own and the emotions of others.
It's amazing how those early experiences can really stick with us,
They do.
and kind of shape how we navigate the world.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about empathy as like a feeling, but does it actually translate into action?
That's a great question. And that's actually something this study looked at.
Okay.
And what they found was that women were more likely to not just feel empathy, but to actually act on it.
So they were more likely to report engaging in behaviors that were driven by empathy, like helping others, getting involved in community support, things like that.
So they don't just feel it, they actually take action.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think this could have anything to do with, the roles and expectations that society places on women?
I think that's definitely part of it.
Okay.
You know, women are often associated with caregiving roles,
Yeah,
both within families and in society as a whole.
for sure.
And so they're often expected to be the emotional support system, the ones who provide comfort and care.
Right.
And I think that constant exposure to, emotionally charged situations could definitely contribute to their heightened emotional responses.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Right.
And, that actually reminds me of another finding from the study. It said that women are more prone to things like news fatigue,
Oh, interesting.
and they worry more about tragedies happening to themselves or their loved ones. 27% of women experience news fatigue compared to 20% of men.
Wow.
And 62% of women worry about similar tragedies happening to them versus 55% for men.
That's quite a difference.
Yeah, it's like they're carrying this heavier emotional load.
It does seem that way.
So we've been talking a lot about, the factors that might contribute to women reporting higher levels of empathy.
Right.
But this study also had some interesting things to say about men.
Yes, it did.
It found that men were actually slightly more likely to report experiencing schadenfreude,
Interesting.
which is that feeling of pleasure when you see somebody else's misfortune.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does this mean that men are just less empathetic overall?
Well, I don't think we can jump to that conclusion.
Okay.
It's important to remember that even though this difference exists, both genders overwhelmingly express concern and empathy. It's not like men are completely devoid of empathy or anything like that.
No, of course not.
But this finding, I think, could point to other factors that might be at play.
Okay, what?
Well, perhaps things like competitive attitudes or differences in risk-taking behavior or even ways of processing difficult emotions. And, these things, again, could be influenced by societal expectations, the way men are often raised to be competitive and not show weakness.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's much more nuanced than simply saying one gender is more empathetic than the other.
Okay, so, we've uncovered all these really interesting differences.
We have.
But how can we actually use this information? How can we apply it to improve our relationships and our interactions with each other?
I think the first step is simply recognizing that these differences exist.
Right.
It's not about judging or labeling anyone, but about understanding that we might approach empathy and emotional responses in different ways.
Yeah.
And I think this understanding can lead to more patience, more compassion.
Makes sense.
Because we can start to see things from the other person's perspective.
For sure.
And, imagine being able to tailor your communication style
Yeah.
based on this knowledge.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. You could offer support in a way that really resonates with the other person, whether they need a listening ear,
Right.
practical help, or just space to process their emotions.
I like that. Yeah. So it's really about meeting people where they're at
Exactly.
and understanding that we might express and experience these things differently.
Right. And I think that's a powerful takeaway because it's not about saying one way is better than the other. It's about recognizing the diversity of human experience.
Yeah. It's about using this knowledge to become better communicators and more empathetic human beings.
Absolutely.
And if empathy is something that we can develop, is there anything we can do to kind of cultivate it in our own lives?
That's a great question. And I think that's the question we should leave our listeners with today.
Yeah.
Something for all of us to ponder, How can we all get better at empathizing with each other? And I think it starts with things like active listening, really trying to understand where the other person is coming from.
Yeah. Challenging our own biases.
Yeah.
And being open to different perspectives, because empathy is like a muscle. The more we use it,
The stronger it gets.
the stronger it gets. Exactly.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to leave it today.
I agree.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive.
It has.
We learned about some really interesting differences in how men and women experience empathy.
Yeah, for sure.
But ultimately, it's a shared human experience. And it's something that we can all work on
Absolutely.
and strive to get better at.
Yes, definitely.
So thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And until next time, keep those empathy muscles working.
Yes. Keep practicing.
All right, see you later.
See ya.